All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Twin Speaks, our Twin Peaks Watch Party podcast. This is episode number 3. I have to apologize right off the bat because my recording software did not record, unfortunately, our commentary for our second episode that included Season 1, Episode 2, and Episode 3. So, as much as I'm sure you enjoy me and Isnib talking and talking and talking in completely hashing out this series, unfortunately, you're going to have to do without our commentary for episode 2. So, moving forward, we're going to try to make sure I went through all of my settings and changed some things to make sure that that doesn't happen again. I think I identified the problem, but unfortunately, we just don't have that recording. So, if you are watching this podcast, I have it posted on YouTube. After the fact, I would just suggest, going through watching episodes 2 and 3 prior to watching this episode of the podcast, and we will have everything hopefully sorted for the remainder of that. All right, so this is episode 3, and today we are watching season 1, episode 4 and 5. Here we go. All right.
Obviously, the focus of the episode was Laura's funeral. Um, kind of had a lot happening in the background as well. Yeah, take us away, Scotty. Initial thoughts? Anything you want to dive into right away?
I actually thought, in focusing on Laura's funeral here, they didn't do like quite as much as they normally have with the background information or the cut scenes to show this or that that's actually going
Hmm.
on at the same time. Um, So, before we get to the funeral, and actually, we'll probably save that for last.
Hmm.
Uh, we found out Laura also worked at Horn's department store at the perfume desk, which seems to be a
Indeed.
moniker for anybody that works at the perfume desk is also involved with One-Eyed Jacks and probably on a prostitution level.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, we found out that Audrey was the one that gave Cooper the note that was mentioning One-Eyed Jacks because he
Yeah.
confirmed that with her handwriting. Um, so she's clearly aware of everything that's going on with One-Eyed Jacks because her father owns the department store
Hmm.
and seems to have this uh, like process set up for
Hmm.
new girls that are coming into the uh how do I want to say, not the process, like a line of
Yeah.
sequential things that
Yeah. Yeah.
happens. You've got this girl is considered for what is going to be the eventual role. She becomes then a perfume counter girl at the department store, and she's
Hmm.
either groomed or questioned or whatever else, and then
Yeah.
becomes
To see if there's
an
the
entertainment.
potential.
Right,
Yeah.
and then becomes an entertainment person at One-Eyed Jacks, and then
Hmm.
to the final part that is involvement in drugs and prostitution.
Hmm.
um So that is just more evidence to the fact that Laura was involved with that and
Hmm.
kind of kept it hidden from anybody that didn't really know,
Hmm.
um, except for the people that were already well aware of it, which would seems to
Yeah.
include, at the very least, Benjamin Horn and Audrey,
Yeah. Indeed.
Ben's brother, potentially
Yeah.
Leland, but Leland
Hmm.
maybe didn't know that his daughter was one of the ones involved.
True. I
But
mean,
also,
we.
Leland may not have any knowledge of any of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think if he was aware that Laura was somehow maybe involved with One Eye Jacks, that he would have had presumably had something to say about that.
Oh, most
I
definitely. So I would at the very least assume that he didn't know Laura was involved if he
mm,
knew that this existed.
exactly. I feel that is it, at most he would be aware of the existence of One Eye Jacks and Ben's involvement. He may not even have known. He may be naive and not know it even
Yeah.
exists. So that's
and
also a
and and I
possibility.
I personally would be leaning towards that
Mm,
Leland wasn't aware of what was going on at all, and
mm,
now in dealing with this, he um, he's suffering because maybe all these things are going to come out, and he's not
mm,
prepared to handle that because he just looked at her as his little girl.
mm,
But I also see the potential for Leland now being torn up more and more so, and not being
mm,
able to deal with the death of his daughter because he he did know of the location and didn't know that she was involved with it, but is now thinking that yes, maybe she was, and it was that much
mm.
worse than he initially thought. So I don't know
Indeed.
if that's going to go anywhere, but it was just a thought that occurred to me.
Yeah, totally.
Um, and then on that same note, the introduction of Maddie, who, if I
Mm,
gathered that correctly, Leland is Maddie's uncle, which would make
mm.
Laura her cousin. So maybe this
Indeed.
is the reference to the cousin in the dream that looks like her.
Potentially.
I personally didn't see much of a resemblance aside from a pretty girl,
Mm, yeah.
but maybe the glasses were kind of throwing me off.
Mm,
Um, so that's maybe the potential revelation as to where that portion of the dream was going. Um, let's see here. I think that's it on that part of it. Um,
um, sorry, I'm just seeing if there's anything I've written down about that specifically. Yeah, only going back slightly to mention bringing Audrey back. Curious comment she made to Cooper when he said, "You weren't friends with her," and she ties in. She said, no." She said something like, "Oh, not really. We weren't close, but I felt that I understand Laura better than most people."
yeah.
Again, maybe tying into her knowledge of her involvement with One Eye Jacks. Um, just found that curious. Maybe I guess at this juncture we'll assume that that is what that is alluding to.
I'm not apt at this moment to trust Audrey's perception of anything that's really going
Right.
on. Yeah. All right. So then the next part, or actually like several little parts. First of all, Leo was home early. He was not actually in Butte. So
Mm,
he lied to Cooper there. And he goes, well, you could ask Shelly, and she'll back that up that I called her
mm,
from Butte, and then Shelly, who was with Bobby, figured out that no, he was not. He was home early. He lied to her. So I feel at
mm,
some point Cooper's going to question Shelly and make that connection that Leo lied about his whereabouts on that night.
yeah,
He was home early.
indeed.
Mr. Mooney, apparently this person who seems to be wanting to create some kind of deal with Norma.
Mm.
I didn't get much more from that conversation, but
It it looked like that was essentially uh, Norma's husband, Hank, his parole officer, essentially.
oh, okay.
So he was just having a meeting with, his, I guess, what's the client? Would that be the correct term? His client's wife, because obviously there's some obligation on Norma that if he's being released from prison, he's just kind of checking in, doing like an interview kind of thing. Um, I and it was implied at least, you know, that he was like, well, what he's gonna have when he's released from prison, he's gonna have to have a job. are you going to be able to assist him get a job as his wife? And Norm was like, well, I own this diner, so push come to shove, I will,
Okay.
give him a job here. Now, as we've seen previously, Norma is absolutely in love with Big Ed,
Right.
and he's probably maybe has mixed feelings about a husband who it was mentioned was doing 3 to 5 on a manslaughter charge.
Right.
So we don't know much about Hank yet, but we know that he's at least a dangerous individual, even if the circumstances of that conviction were, not as maybe we don't know the circumstances of it, so we shouldn't make too many assumptions about his character. But it seemed at least Norma was like going going along with the process. She wasn't like trying to throw any spanners in the works to kind of delay his release. She's like, yeah, okay, cool. My husband's going to be released from prison. Okay, whatever I need to do to help with that.
Yeah, and
Um,
it seems like at some point, if she's going to make good on her, I don't want to say promise, but her statement
mm,
to Ed that she's going to leave her husband, it
mm,
seems like she's kind of holding back on what that plan is going to be and when and
right,
how it's going to
exactly.
be put into action.
Indeed.
Obviously, she would hold back in talking to her husband's parole officer, but like there seemed to be no other indication so far otherwise of her talking to anybody else about that plan of action, even Ed.
Indeed.
They haven't elaborated on that at all. Um, so uh, let's move now then to um, Cooper sitting there with Audrey, and he has this exchange with her, and then she leaves, and now the sheriff and the secretary come in, and he's relaying to them his dream. I found it kind of interesting that at the end of last episode, he called him in the middle of the night to say, "I know who the killer is. Oh, but it can
Mm,
wait till morning." Now we had this meeting. He goes, "Okay, here's my dream. I know who the killer is, but we have to solve the mystery in order to find out who it is." Like,
yeah. It's like crying
he's
out loud, Cooper. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like, I know who the killer is. We expect you to know.
yeah,
His interpretation is, the identity of the killer has been revealed to me. It's buried in my subconscious.
yeah,
We have to. we.
yeah. She
It's like
whispered
you
it
not.
in my ear. I don't remember the name.
Like, what's he like? He can't
Yeah.
help himself.
Um.
But at least in Cooper's mind, he feels that that dream was of great significance, and that has significantly helped the investigation along, even if it's in a very ephemeral way that he can't quite
Yeah.
tangibly explain at the minute.
Yeah, so at the very least, he solidified the details of who he believes the killer to be, Mike and Bob that lived above the convenience
Mm,
store, um, and the revelation of a detail there that I didn't catch the last time. That first of all, yes, they had tattoos that were related to the killings. Bob was the main person involved with that aspect of it, so we could deduce that Bob, whoever he is a sadistic psychopath or something along those lines, and Mike wasn't necessarily so. He was in fact he probably wasn't. He was just kind of going along with it or assisting in one fashion or another for whatever ways that he justified to himself, but then he actually cut his arm off to rid himself of the tattoo that marked him in
mm.
this process, and then the detail that I missed, and then he shot Bob.
Yeah, that wasn't certainly wasn't revealed in the dream.
No,
Obviously,
but unless it was like some kind of wording or messaging in the dream
mm,
sequence that Cooper then went a step further and said this means
yeah,
that. So
yeah,
I don't know how
indeed.
that's going to come into play there. But it seems clear to me that they're approaching it from an angle that the one-armed man that was hanging around the hospital that we're searching for and can't find yet is indeed Mike.
Mm.
and he's the one that cut off his arm. And it seems to me like they're approaching it from this angle of these murders that were committed weren't necessarily recent. Like it could be a whole string of murders over a supposed amount of time, and then maybe after this last one, Mike had enough and shot Bob, who was the murderer,
Mm,
or something else happened. Um, we'll have to see where that's going. But I believe Cooper in trying to, and maybe rightfully so, giving a lot of credence to his dream, is saying this is the scenario that I'm seeing ahead of time from the
mm,
details that are available to me, and now I just need to investigate further to actually find the people responsible and figure it out.
indeed.
So the question in my mind is, in relation to that, who are Mike and Bob? Ob- more obviously at this point, not Mike and Bobby.
No, indeed.
Um, but they then become the prime suspects. Who are they? They lived probably in past tense above a convenience store at some point. What convenience store? Who, what is the relation to the people in the town, and what are they doing now?
Mm,
Is Bob dead? Yeah, was he shot by Mike and it was a temporary thing? He got the upper hand, or they are no longer in contact with each other, but he survived. What is the situation with these two individuals now?
mm, indeed.
Um, so then we move on to the revelation of the secret society
Mm,
that is apparently the Bookhouse Boys. That includes the sheriff, Hawk, Big Ed, James, and the other guy that I can't remember his name. Uh,
yeah,
they,
James's buddy.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't. Sorry.
um, they. I found it really interesting that the way the sheriff characterized this, the purpose of the secret society is to fight this evil that persists and is just kind of lurking in the woods
Yeah,
and is ever
various
present.
curious wording from him.
Right.
Um,
Which, I mean, that would highlight a little bit more my what's the word, suspicion
Suspicion?
that there is a supernatural element here,
Mm,
which may be entirely false, but it seems to me there's
yeah,
there's something more at play that has to be categorized as supernatural, and we just haven't really seen its foundation yet. There's just these
right.
little bits of information that lend itself to that.
Mm,
Um, and if there isn't an actual supernatural element, okay, so we've got the Bookhouse Boys that have just been kind of like a little bit of vigilantism or behind the scenes operation of justice, um,
mm,
with the sheriff being the ringleader, so to speak,
mm,
and running this operation where they kind of handle things behind the scenes, including
yeah,
capturing Bernard, the brother of Jacques, who they believe is a drug mule, carting the drugs in, handing them over to Jacques, who then does distribution with Leo and whoever else.
right.
Um, and they start interrogating him. And the only thing we find out from that is that Jacques is supposed to be returning to the roadhouse, even though he's been missing for several days.
Mm,
And we might be able to figure out what the hell is going on with Jacques at this point.
yeah.
Uh,
Curious, aside to that, Scotty, briefly, as Jacques was walking to work that
oh,
evening,
was that Jacques? Okay,
yeah, yeah,
I didn't
that,
catch
yeah, it
that.
wasn't made clear, yeah, because
I
we've
was
not
like,
actually
oh,
seen
that's
him
a,
up until
that's
this point.
that's a, another guy that's involved. No, that's actually him.
Yeah, yeah, that is Jock. Yeah, uh, the, he literally sees a red light on the top of the roadhouse, which is flashing on and off, and he recognizes that as an indicator that his brother Bernard has not arrived, or that something is at least wrong. So then he's like, oh, never mind this. Not only is he not going into the roadhouse, he's calling up Leo to get him to pick him up, to drop him off over the border,
Right.
to Scarpa, essentially. I just found it curious that maybe it was used for something else, but whoever the staff are at the roadhouse, or whoever actually owns or manages the roadhouse, they seem to at least be, maybe they're aware of what Jacques' side business, or even support him, or even they're all directly involved. If they've literally got a light on the roof to to let or stay away, the police are here, or could be stopping by. So maybe this whole operation is fairly involved. And going back to the previous episode, we know there's Leo had an unknown accomplice out in the woods when he met up with Mike and Bobby. So maybe this is not as small time as it first appears to be,
Right.
but who can say?
Yeah. So I was going to hit on that. The what else did we have here? All right, so I think that pretty much covers that aspect of it. So we know that more than likely Bernard is the drug mule, and now they have him in their custody, but maybe not for too long, because if this is the Bookhouse Boys, they might be apt to let him go and
Right,
follow him,
indeed.
or do some other investigative work along those lines to figure out what is going on with this. They tell Cooper that they've been building their information and getting this all together to do a major drug bust. So they're clearly behind this investigative work that's trying to expose this and then bring the people to justice. So then we come to Albert Rosenfield, who I found it very odd that in the beginning they're fighting with him trying to do more testing on Laura's body, forensic testing, and them saying, no, we have to go do the funeral, so you have to release the body so we can take her to the funeral. And he's not having it until Cooper shows up and talks him down, and he didn't fight that. So I found it very odd that Albert apparently felt that there was more testing that needed to be done on the body before it could be released, but when Cooper told him to stand down, he didn't argue with Cooper at all on that.
Indeed.
So I don't know if there's he decided that it wasn't worth it, or he was going above and beyond, or obsessing about this testing on the body.
It's hard to know, isn't it?
Yeah.
As on the later scene, when we actually find the results of his tests at the sheriff's department.
Yeah, so apparently
he's found out quite a lot. So part of me wonders if in Albert's kind of arrogance or belligerence, he's like, well, I've done 95% of the tests. I'm a perfectionist. I'm proud. I take pride in my work. So I'm going to check stuff that maybe is not even that important, but I want to do a thorough job. And I don't care that you've got a funeral, and I'm just going to, you can shut up and get on with it. Whereas maybe Coop stepping in, and I guess Cooper's not his direct superior, but I guess in the hierarchy of the FBI, he is obviously clearly of a higher rank, so to speak.
Right.
So maybe he was like, oh, okay, well, now I've got my boss, my superior in this case, at least, telling me to step down. I guess I can let that 5% go. So I don't know, I can kind of see both sides of it, because in a murder investigation, you want as much information as you possibly can.
Right.
But on the other side, it's like literally the funeral is, they need the body for the funeral. There's no two ways about it. Unfortunately, that's just the way things have worked out, Albert. Get on with it. So to actually cause a ruckus and literally a fight in the morgue is
yeah, so
I don't know.
we could definitely chalk it up to that, but it just seemed kind of odd to me that
He wouldn't even question it as soon as Coop said,
yeah, not
yeah.
only would he not question it to Cooper, but he was so adamant before about drilling a hole directly in Laura's head to do this or
Mm,
that, and now he just kind of abandons that.
yeah.
Okay, so then we move on to the actual findings of the autopsy, and toxicology came back that she was under the influence of cocaine,
Hmm.
um, twine that was embedded in the wrist, and he somehow came up with tied up two different times, and therefore that supposed that she was bound in such a manner, specifically with her arms behind her back, in the way that
Mm,
he, posed,
mm,
which Cooper then identified with her arms being sometimes behind her in his dream. Industrial strength soap,
mm,
where apparently the killer washed his hands and then kissed her.
mm,
Maybe before or after her death, we don't know.
mm,
Claw marks and bites on the shoulder. A plastic fragment that had a letter J on it found in her digestive system.
mm.
Um, and lots of tie-ins to the locations where some of that happened.
Indeed. Yeah, lots more information there, but not immediately adding up to any answers.
No.
But interesting. Yeah, I'm glad you got all that. Yeah, we've covered that. I guess we need to. I guess. Oh my god, this pen's terrible. Obviously the funeral, but I guess there's a couple of things I would just mention before we dive into that. Uh, Interesting that after the Cooper's conversation with Albert, where Albert's like, "I don't want to." Yeah, here's the report with the sheriff punching me, and Coop's like, "Look, I understand your position, Albert, but you've overstepped your bounds here. Your attitude is, ridiculous, honestly. So, I'm not signing your report. In fact, you're lucky that I'm not filing a report against you for your behaviour. So you drop it, and I'll drop it.
Right.
We'll
and
get on with it."
and Albert is obviously over the top.
Mm.
He insults everybody that doesn't meet his standard of perfection, which is everybody. And
Yeah, exactly.
obviously he thinks so little of the other people that he's working with. It's insinuated in everything he says. However, um, I found it interesting that Cooper's premise for talking Rosenfield down in that scene was, this is small town America. There is good
Mm.
and kind people here and all this. And therefore, you can't bring your big city uh, uh, nastiness and
Mm.
negativity and apply it to a place like this.
Right.
And therefore, you need to shut the fuck up. And
Mm.
then almost in the very next scene, he's confronted by the sheriff who says, yes, there's good and kind people here, and we're, small town America, but there's also evil lurking in the background. And we're the good
Mm.
guys fighting that evil constantly. Um,
Indeed.
so that appeared to me kind of be like this emotional dichotomy between Cooper and how he would characterize this town and its people, and then justifying that to Rosenfield and saying, sorry, you can't judge them like that. And then he turns around and finds out, oh, there's a whole bunch of other evil things lurking in the background, maybe, that these people
Mm.
see, and it's not quite
Indeed.
as quaint and kind and wholesome as
Yeah.
it
This.
appears to be.
Yeah. There's a lot going on underneath the surface
Right.
that you do not know about yet. Indeed. But he's clearly enamored with the town in the few days that
Right.
he's been there.
To the
Because he
point.
does, after that conversation with Albert, he makes reference to Diane on his tape recorder,
Right.
Remind me to look into real estate options, clearly referring to Twin Peaks. So
Yeah.
it seemed to be, at least. Um, Something else completely unrelated. Little scene we had between Ed and Nadine. The dean mentions that Ed and Norma used to be a couple in high school.
Yeah.
And obviously that relationship broke apart at some point, and he ended up with Nadine. How that came to be, and and also she demonstrates her what's the best way of putting it? Her tenuous grasp on reality, shall we say? When James turns up, and Ed's like, "Oh, it's James," and she's like, "James who?" And that's literally your nephew. What are you talking about, Nadine? She's like almost like she's in her own little
Yeah.
world with her drapes and her little ornaments and this idea of Ed. And like one minute she's, you know, absolutely in love with him. Next day she's absolutely angry at him for some perceived thing. And clearly Ed's not happy. He's just kind of, I guess he's choosing the path of least resistance by doing nothing. But
Yeah, I saw
I feel,
his response when she kissed him.
yeah, he wasn't exactly
It wasn't.
exactly enthused, was
Yeah. All right,
he?
so a couple other things before we get to the funeral.
Hmm,
Catherine has the second mill book. She heard
hmm,
Josie and the sheriff getting busy, maybe at the very
hmm,
least, kissing and him confessing his love to her in various ways.
yeah.
And she's worried about Catherine killing her, and she confronts Pete. Catherine confronts Pete. So
Hmm,
Catherine is well aware now of what Josie knows and about the book and about Pete's involvement, um, and that's definitely going to be something relevant to her plan of action in the near future. Uh,
absolutely.
Jacoby at the cemetery, after the fact he
Hmm,
wasn't at the funeral, reveals his affection for Laura. Not necessarily love, but deep affection for Laura to
hmm,
Cooper. Um, and there might be, further revelations along that line to Cooper or to somebody else by Jacoby. I think he's no longer necessarily going to hide things that were
hmm,
going on between him and Laura.
yeah.
Um, and also Shelley, after Leo left to go grab Jacques and get him out of state, Shelley has a gun now in the house
Yeah.
that she is hiding.
Yeah. Which I think it's fair to assume it's not just for self-defense from
No,
strangers. It might be from a extremely abusive husband.
which I
Um,
which I got to imagine. Okay, so if at some point she's going to confront him like he's abusing her, and she goes to defend herself in that manner, she may end up killing him in self-defense, or she is actually beginning to formulate a plan of action to just outright murder him in
Potentially.
retaliation for all of the abuse over the years. So, one of those
Indeed.
two things. And then finally, the funeral.
Mm.
That was the greatest professional wrestling funeral of all time. I just wish my funeral, whenever that happens, is going to be quite as exciting. Um, yeah, the fight breaking out between James and Bobby. Bobby, who's fucking unhinged, and he just he claims he cared about Laura, but he never
Mm.
really did. It's just like this false caring that he's presenting to other people.
Mm.
I don't think he ever really cared about her.
Yeah,
Um,
it's almost like a way of lashing out, of like maybe blaming other people.
yeah,
Um, you know, almost like he's like, I cared. It's like,
and in that,
did you?
what do they call that? It's kind of like a visible virtuous nature,
Virtue signaling?
virtue signaling. Yeah,
Yeah. Exactly.
That
He doesn't
seems to
actually
me
care, but
exactly what
he's
Bobby is
he's
doing there.
signaling that I did. I cared more than all of you.
And
Yeah. And
he even insinuated in the conversation with his father
mm,
beforehand that he was going to do that, or
yeah, didn't
something
he?
along those lines. He was going to
Yeah.
tear
His
that
father's
funeral up
like,
and
yeah, it was his father's kind of like trying to pep talk him. It's going to be fine. We're there for you if you need to, like, kind of saying if you need to cry or it's, just survive. And Bobby's like, cry, afraid? Are you having a bubble? Well, I'm about to tear this chisel up. So he clearly was just waiting for the opportunity to kick off. Um, it's got a lot of pent up emotions, to say the least.
yeah,
And like you say, maybe he cared, but maybe he didn't care as much as he actually uh leads everyone to believe or wants everybody to believe. But interesting comment in his outburst at the funeral. Um, essentially everyone here knew that Laura was in trouble, and none of us did anything about it. Obviously, presumably, he doesn't know any specifics, or not certainly not all the specifics. And he's like, "Oh, you're all a bunch of hypocrites." Like as if to say, "Why are you here pretending to care?" When, from my perspective, none of you actually did, because
right,
there was more going on in Laura's life that all of us, to some degree, had some inkling of, and none of us stepped up to actually try and help her or do anything about it.
right.
And the result is she's now dead. So all of you feel guilty.
Which I'm getting a sneaking suspicion that David Lynch's overall theme with this is that no matter what kind of a front is being presented, or what something appears to be, there's always something sinister lurking under the surface in some
Mm,
kind of fashion that you probably have not even thought of.
mm,
Laura, who appeared to be this very kind, energetic soul who was, involved in a whole bunch of different things that, were public works or assistance or, job or school or whatever else. And then in the background, she's actually into drugs and prostitution and, these things that you wouldn't expect necessarily from a
mm,
girl who puts that kind of a front forward. Um,
indeed.
and everybody has got this kind of like false persona that they put forward, and really there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background, and everybody maybe knows that everybody
Mm,
else is involved in something, but nobody talks about it because
yeah,
then we would have to confront these things,
exactly.
you know.
Totally. Um, a couple of things. So, if we, I don't know if you've got anything else, Scotty, but my
just
last couple of things are
just Leland trying to body surf on the coffin.
yeah. So if we go back, if we take a couple of go back up to the first episode, what we've seen of Leland and Sarah, from the beginning, Sarah was. I mean, obviously they were both distraught. Their daughter's been murdered, and there's no solace or closure for that. Something like that. They're probably both going to be mentally broken in some way for the rest of their lives. However, initially, Sarah is completely distraught to the degree where Doc Hayward is giving her some kind of medical sedative to keep her calm. And Leland, what little we see of him, clearly upset, but he seems to be keeping it together in the at least in the role of looking after his wife. Um, and by the time we get to the funeral, it's almost like those roles have switched. Um, Sarah obviously upset, but she seems to be keeping it together mentally.
All right.
Leland, we saw his outburst last episode in his living room with the music, dancing with the photograph of Laura, um, having a bit of a mental breakdown, and then at the funeral, he, like you say, he literally throws himself on top of her coffin. Pretty extreme, pretty extreme behavior. Even to the point of interesting comment from Sarah. Uh,
I didn't catch that.
she says to Leland, like, "Oh, stop doing that. Get out of there." Or whatever. Um, I don't know how telling this is, or if this was chosen specifically. She says, "Quote: don't ruin this too. That suggests to me that there's something else he has previously
Yeah.
ruined. What could that be? We'll have to wait and see. Or maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's like a throwaway comment. Maybe she's just annoyed. Maybe Sarah's position is, look, we're both emotionally devastated here, but sort your life out, bro. Keep keep
Yeah.
it together a little bit. Don't be like having a mental breakdown. Look,
Out,
you've already made a mess at home. You got blood all over the living room carpet. Don't ruin the funeral as well. Um,
out of all the details that we've received on the interpersonal relationships and how like each cell is like, so you've got Norma and Ed, you've got
mm,
the Horns, you've got these various interpersonal relationships, and we've gathered tons and tons of details on almost all of them. The one
mm,
that's missing is the home life of
mm,
Leland and Sarah and their daughter and what that was like. They have not explored at
mm.
all what it was
No, indeed.
previously before this, and or revealed any details really, except for maybe that potentially, as
Mm,
to what this relationship between their family was prior to the murder.
indeed. And I wonder if Cooper's going to try and dig into that a little bit more. We'll see. One final thought I wanted to mention after the funeral. I'm sorry, and Veronica, to your comment, she asked, "Did we see Madeline at the funeral?" We did very briefly for like about half a second. We did see her there, but very easy to miss, Veronica. Um, Shelley at work after the funeral, laughing at the events of the funeral, specifically Leland with the coffin,
Yeah.
and she found it hilarious. I mean, I don't know what that says about
As did the
Shelley's
people she was
character.
joking with, these
Also found it hilarious.
no name
Yeah,
townsfolk that were just laughing
mm,
their ass off at that. Yeah.
yeah, kind of. Now I wonder if is Shelley maybe not as innocent as she seems, or is that just unconsciously her de-stressing or dealing with the abuse that she is suffering herself. Either way, I
Hard to
feel it's
say.
pretty
Yeah.
inappropriate to say the least. Yeah, so I think that's everything I want to say, Scott. I don't know if there's any other comments you had at all. So,
Yeah. No, I think that covers everything from that episode. Oh, Audrey spying behind the wall. So,
oh, of
uh,
course, yeah, secret spy
yeah,
uh,
yeah, very
in the
Scooby Doo
hotel.
ish.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we're going to see that come into play more prominently now, because Audrey clearly is spending time literally behind the walls, but not so much
Mm,
behind the walls in every capacity, watching and gathering information on everybody she can. So
right.
if anybody has revealing information that not only might solve the murder mystery, but is basically the pay dirt on everybody, she's the person. She's
Mm,
the one that is literally spying on not only her own family but just about anybody else that she can, to gather information and have that at her disposal, maybe for blackmail purposes or something in the future.
indeed.
She's a very cunning individual.
Indeed, yeah. Um, and her, she seems very intrigued by Cooper.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just because he's this big, eccentric, interesting character that's just unlike anyone else she's probably ever met before. Or there's more to that, but she definitely is very intelligent, very cunning, and definitely wants to. You get the vibe that she's she's her own most important priority, and she
yeah.
will. She's almost like she's written off her family. They're either of no use or she feels they don't care about her. So she's probably doing what she can um, to her own advantage in what ways she feels she can. And she also seems to be, I guess, counter to her perceived boring life, very curious. So part of her sneakiness and investigation may not be for advantage, just that that's her form of entertainment. Um,
Mm.
so we'll have to see how that pans out. So yeah, that's wrapped up everything on my end, Sky.
Yep, that's it for me.
Excellent. Perfect. Yeah, thank you guys. I'm going to run out for 1 minute. I will be right back, and then we'll get ready for our next episode, episode 5, which I believe is called The One-Armed Man. I'll be back
Dun
in a
dun
sec, guys.
dun.
A lot of clues and revelations all over the place in this
Yeah.
one. Take us away, Sky.
Okay. Um. So at the beginning, we find out Hawks trailed the one-armed man to this motel. Horn and Catherine are meeting in the same hotel, hooking up, discussing arson further. Andy apparently got extremely excited and fired off his gun. Yeah,
I know he's not the best at his job, but
he's.
my
I'm
God.
quickly losing faith in Andy's ability to keep his shit together. Um, but we confront this one-armed man, which this entire encounter was extremely strange. First of all,
Mm,
he he does indeed only have one arm. He says he lost his arm in a car accident. He's a
mhm,
traveling salesman who apparently sells shoes, but he was in this car accident, but he can't remember where he was going when this
mm,
accident occurred. So immediately I'm
indeed.
suspicious of his supposed recollection of the car accident. Feels like he was well aware of where he was going, but decided to make it out to be that he couldn't remember.
Mm,
And then the uh, suitcase is opened, and they're all right shoes, and they are his. He says they are his sales models. That immediately is also extremely suspicious because
mm,
even somebody who has the really stupid job of going door to door trying to sell shoes, um, I don't think they would just carry exclusively right shoes with them.
mm,
It feels much more like trophies. For
mm.
some reason
That's the
he's
vibe you got.
yeah, and just in general, the way he was answering the questions seemed far too relaxed,
Mm,
far too calculated. That these were just answers that he would come up with if he was ever questioned about this and that.
right,
And he was well prepared to deliver those answers. I didn't
right.
catch at the end what he was breaking down over.
Mm.
Do you remember what that was?
Uh, no, not specifically. All I've got on the one-armed man specifically is the fact that he we got his so like half of because obviously Cooper wonders that, oh, is this the one-armed man from my dream? Mike, the associate of Bob, who is potentially the killer,
Yeah.
Laura's killer. Um, and then obviously Hawks tracked down this one-armed man who's been hanging around the hospital, and he claims it's because his friend Bob Lydecker, who is was in a bar fight or something and is now in a coma. That's why he was at the hospital to
Right.
visit his best buddy Bob. Bob happens to be a veterinarian in in Twin Peaks. Um, all strange, but the fact that some of it ties in, some of it doesn't. So his name, which was very, very easy to miss, is Philip Gerard. Middle name Michael.
Right.
And also, as only having one arm, Cooper asks him, "Oh, did you have a tattoo?" Which he says that he did, but it was something completely innocuous, like, oh, it had mum on the
Yeah.
tattoo, as opposed to something of what Cooper is actually looking for. So clearly there's something going on here, but it's not quite aligning with what Cooper was expecting. All in all, very mysterious individual. But yeah, so your overall vibe, Scotty, is he's not innocent. There's something weird. He's hiding something.
Yeah, well, at the very least, he's not being truthful for whatever reason. There were
Mm,
several answers there that just didn't add up. Um, Circumstances that can't be explained away, like the shoes and whatever else. So in any case, okay, so we got from that his associate was Bob Lydecker, and my thought when they mentioned the bar was that he was there on the night that they all went there and the fight broke out, and my thoughts immediately went back to Jacques putting something
mm,
in Ed's drink to knock him out.
mm,
And that maybe he did the same thing to Bob Lydecker, but we don't know what that was. And then instead of just knocking him out for whatever, it put him in a coma.
mm,
So Bob Lydecker's in the hospital now. They cleared up the twine being the specific brand and that it came from the store that apparently was directly below the vet's office, which
mm,
also cleared up the connection of they live above a convenience store. There
mm.
could be something else there that needs to be revealed as far as like the relationship between Mike and Bob and how they actually quote unquote live above the convenience store.
Mm,
Um, and they go in there and take the files, and that leads to the revelation of the bird attack that
mm,
is left the claw and whatever bite marks on Laura's shoulder
mm.
was this mina bird that then was revealed, belonging to Jacques apparently, and he had brought
Indeed.
this bird into Lydecker for whatever, and the record of that then connects these couple of things that more than likely
Indeed.
it was Jacques' bird that left the marks on Laura's shoulder.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It certainly seems to suggest that.
at the very least, yeah, it has the presentation of
Mm,
that being the connection there. Um, so I thought it was kind of interesting, a couple of things that this method of seemingly tying things up, where they're making the connections that you've got this forensic evidence that Albert has found, specifically probably a mina bird, or I can't remember what else he said, parakeet or something,
parrot. Yeah.
parrot, and then they find that information right at the same time and say, okay, here's the
Mm,
connection, we're gonna go check this out, and Bob Lydecker is now maybe one of the prime suspects or at least involved in
mm,
this because there are too many things that there's this circumstantial evidence, um, and they're making at least the basic connections that you might in a murder investigation and saying
mm,
these are the things that might lead to a conviction. Um, in fact, then the other piece of that evidence, let me hop over to the piece of plastic with the J on it that was found in her stomach, and it was reconstructed. I was thinking about that, how they might do that by looking at edges, curves, whatever else, and
yeah.
that's entirely what they did. They came up with it looking like a poker chip,
Mm,
um, and that would then lead one to believe that it came from One-Eyed Jacks, and that somehow this piece of the poker chip ended up in her stomach, probably at the behest of the murderer.
mm,
Um, so then that also completes perceptive connection between One-Eyed
Indeed.
Jack's and Laura's murder.
And they really drive that home in the separate scene between Catherine and Ben, where he has a poker chip on him, drops it on the floor, and Catherine picks up just to have a look at it, just to show us, presumably the viewer, here you go. If it was any doubt, this is what one actually looks
Right.
like.
And then the final connection was, I think, the industrial soap, which you might assume that Lydecker was, for whatever reason, decided that it was necessary to thoroughly wash his hands with an industrial soap that you would use in a vet's office,
Mm,
and potentially have some connection with how he would handle dealing with a kidnapped person or a victim of his crimes, if he is the person that is involved behind all of this. I don't think that is the case at this point, in particular, simply because he's lying in a coma in the hospital, supposedly,
mm,
and how did he get there, and what was, why was, if he was poisoned or whatever else Jacques did that to him, why? Was it
mm,
because maybe he knew too much, or was he simply the victim of, circumstance, and has absolutely nothing to do with any of this? You know,
indeed.
for lack of a better term, he was maybe framed.
Mm, indeed.
Um, so it's hard to say at this point, I think, but that's at least obviously where they're trying to lead you with these supposed completed connections, that Lydecker is indeed the man in the vision or the dream that Cooper had, and that's the connection
Mm,
with Mike and Bob, and they lived above a convenience store. But
yeah, we've got.
n-
Sorry, go ahead.
none of that is uh, conclusive enough, and there were a few bits of contradictory things,
Mm,
such as they didn't actually live above the convenience store. It was just a vet's office run by Lydecker, and his best friend Mike was somehow involved with the business, or just good friends with him, so he was always there, being in very close proximity, relatively above a convenience store slash gas station, whatever. And um, the other thing was, Cooper showed the drawing
mm.
from the vision to the secretary, and she right off the bat said, "No, that is not Lydecker."
Yeah, that's not him at all. And also, the same picture was shown to Philip Gerard, and he was like, "No, that's not. Not
Right.
only is that not my friend Bob, I've never seen this man before." Curiously, though, he says, "Oh, he looks like somebody though." So
Right.
I don't know if that's part of his, as you feel, his suspected defensive routine for dealing with law enforcement, to like give a seem more relaxed and at ease than he
Did
is, but.
did we establish any kind of connection between the man identifying as Mike in the one-armed man in
Mm.
Cooper's dream, with who the one-armed man Philip Mike Gerard actually looked like? Because I don't remember what he looked like in the dream.
No, I mean, I don't know if that is skipped over or assumed. I can tell you this, it's definitely the same actor. So I
It
assume from
is.
Cooper's point of view, he's like, this is the same guy.
Yep.
He looks the same. This is Mike from my dream. In reality, his name is Philip Gerard, but this is the guy who was talking about Bob in my dream and taking off his arm and such. He didn't expressly, signify that though, but I think that's the gist we're supposed to pick up on. And of course, we got a bit of from Sarah Palmer. Um, her. Not only did we get the, because we saw it clearly when she had the vision of this Bob individual, and obviously Cooper in his dream confirms that is myself and Sarah Palmer saw the same man. he looks the same. We also get the final scene of the very first episode, where we see somebody picking up the necklace in the woods. It wasn't expressly explained at the end of that episode, but Sarah was actually having that as a vision, as is explained here.
Yeah.
Which obviously, when James and Donna hear about this, they go and investigate and do indeed find out the necklace is missing. Interesting to note, though, yeah, as Donna says to Audrey when they're discussing briefly in their scene, oh, Laura said her mum was always spooky and that she had visions, and so did Laura.
Yeah.
Not only that, Coop mentions that, oh yeah, I didn't go with you to the Palm residence because I'm a strong sender. So there's obviously Coop and other people believe in this idea of maybe like a sixth sense or dreams having meanings or visions, whereas maybe other people would dismiss that. There's certainly him and other people believe it's a real thing. One person who seemingly dismisses it is Leland himself. He, at the very beginning of the episode, he's like, "Oh yeah, tell them about the other one." He seems very dismissive of the idea,
Right.
Almost patronizing towards his wife about it. But
In his pajamas and bathrobe, looking completely unshaven and
yeah,
scruffy.
right, exactly. So I mean, at least he's. I guess both of them, their mental state is all over the place at the minute. So they're gonna have moments of lucidity and moments of breakdown. But he seemed okay in that moment. Sorry, yeah, do continue, sir.
Yeah, it's hard to say where that all that is going, but that's even more. That's probably like the sixth thing that I've seen since the beginning of the series that is extremely embedded low level evidence that there is something supernatural, even if it's just ESP or sixth sense type deal. I mean, Cooper obviously believes that. He believes that your dreams have not only like this relevance, relevance to what is going on in your life. So he would recognize, something, but it doesn't click in his conscious. So in his subconscious, his dream is telling him what this is, and he then puts the pieces together. And but that was seemingly a step further in him referring to himself as a strong sender, because he's now believing that his dream, where he envisioned the man that could be known as Bob, that is supposedly the murderer or related to the murder specifically, he then sent that image to Sarah, who had this vision, because she was then receiving what he was sending, and that's how she got this image of the murderer. And she had never seen this person before, but she's very adamant that in her belief that he is the person who killed her daughter. So I find that interesting, and that seems to be confirmed by the fact that Cooper looked at the drawing and said, "Yes, this is him." But you got one tiny detail wrong, and his eyes need to be a bit closer together.
Yeah, indeed.
So something is definitely afoot there.
Yeah.
And I also have a sneaking suspicion that that is related to the old evil lurking in the forest that the sheriff uh, talked to the group and Cooper about, that this is their secret organization, the Bookhouse Boys, that this is what they do, is fight this ongoing evil, and it has for many generations before them and will after them. Okay, so is this evil entity or presence or whatever it is somehow related now to the ESP and the sixth sense that these people have, the visions that they are giving and receiving, the dreams, and how they relate to everything that's going on? Is that now related to this whatever type of presence is out there?
Indeed. Indeed.
That we still have zero real evidence for. It's been presented in this
Yeah.
manner that it's kind of all in these people's heads. But now we have
Yeah.
a little bit more concrete evidence that Cooper dreamed this guy's face and Sarah had the vision of this guy's face and those two images align,
Yeah.
according to
Yeah.
Cooper's admission.
Yeah. If it was all nonsense, you'd think that would not be possible.
Right.
Let's just say that. Um, I interested Audrey. We've got a little bit from Audrey. Confided in Donna. Um, she says essentially, I guess, whether it's just on a whim or whether she has some actual abiding interest, she seems very taken by Agent Cooper in the fact that she's got it into her head that she wants to, or claims to at least, wants to help him with the investigation in her own means. Tried to get a bit of information out of Donna about Laura, and they've kind of formed some very loose agreement where they're going to try and have their own private investigation and help each other out.
Right.
Audrey's taken the stance of trying to talk her father around to, oh, I want to help out, Dad, with the family business. I've changed. um, she seems to be trying to take the infiltration route of allow me to work at the department store,
Right.
maybe with cosmetics. So she's obviously got her, because she's pretty smart. She's got her eye on trying to get some information directly from the perfume counter about One-Eyed Jacks and seeing what she can find out that way. Donna and James also agree that at the end there, we have to work independently or with Audrey to solve, find out who Laura's murder is, not just for Laura but for ourselves. And James is kind of going along with it, but he doesn't seem as into the idea necessarily as Donna is. But that's his new girlfriend, so he's gonna probably go along with it. And of course, towards the end, we find out with Bobby and Shelley.
Well,
Shelley
hold on a
reveals.
second before you move on
Go
from
for it.
that. Let me address that.
Oh yeah,
So I
certainly.
didn't see a lot of value in the bathroom scene,
Mm,
except for Donna seems to have this level of aloofness
mm,
that she shares with James. Neither Donna nor James really knows what's going on. They've got
indeed.
no clue that Laura had this secret life. They they certainly haven't discussed among themselves anything that shows that they know what's going on, and therefore they're kind of like at a loss or at a disadvantage when it comes to
Mm,
anybody else, like Audrey, who does know more.
mm,
So Audrey was utilizing her upper hand in the bathroom scene with just like she's not teaming up with Donna. She is
mm.
using Donna to get more information to add to her
Right.
collection, and
Fair
and
enough. Yeah.
then obviously that's uh, the whole point of her approaching her father is she still does not seem to be really wanting to independently investigate Laura's death. She's just
Mm,
adding to her information collection and
indeed.
lying to her father about wanting to, um, you know, be an honest and good person and work her way up from the bottom. So yeah, obviously she's going to this point of working in the department store at the perfume or cosmetics counter, where something in proximity to where the information is, and we get that easily with how she's manipulating her father. So she hasn't changed at all, but she's trying to convince her father, and Ben, for the most part, takes that and says, okay, fine, we'll give this a trial,
Mm,
and gives her what she wants, which is just to be in a position to gather more information. that wasn't necessarily, however, in the bathroom scene as evident that
Mm,
what she was doing, I think, was just using Donna to get more of what she wants. And
yeah.
Donna certainly isn't aware of that at all. Like, her father
Mm,
probably has an inkling that this is not necessarily on the up and up, and he'll still keep an eye on Audrey
yeah, for sure.
as this miscreant, not someone to be trusted. But Donna doesn't appear to get that at all.
Mm,
And she, in her lack of knowledge and her lack of understanding of what's really going on in this town and who is involved, including your close good friends, she is buying the line that Audrey just wants to, run this independent investigation of Laura's death and try to figure out what they can find out.
yeah,
So
indeed.
so in other words, Donna feels that Audrey is being completely truthful,
Mm,
and
whereas,
that's going to be to her detriment in the future, I think.
indeed, yeah, I'm sure. Uh, so yeah, sorry. So yeah, we Bobby and Shelley. Uh, Main takeaway from that, of course, is Shelley's hidden Leo's blood stained uh was it jacket or pants? I can't remember.
I think it was
The
just
jacket
a
wasn't
shirt.
shirt, just shirt. Um Obviously she kind of got some idea that she'd probably hide that, but it had some importance. But she's obviously thought not too much more on that, but enough to show Bobby, and Bobby's like, "Oh, that's that I can use that." So he takes it and plants it at breaks into presumably and Jacques' apartment and plants it there. Which obviously that helps the police out, tie Jacques and Leo together directly. Which I'm sure they would have got that anyway, but I wonder if Bobby was thinking that specifically. I guess he must have been, with the idea of that would put more pressure on Leo, which would alleviate any pressure on him from Leo. I guess.
Right.
I guess that's where he was coming from. Um, uh, so slight aside, which is not really related to the overall story or mystery. Andy and Lucy. What do you think's going on there?
Well, it seems like I mean, they clearly had a relationship because he
mm,
mentioned about not being able to stay over her place the night
mm,
before. So they had a relationship. Then something happened that Lucy is basically like, yeah, this ain't happening anymore. And
mm,
then it becomes apparent to Cooper, who's reading the body language, and then they start talking
mm,
about it, and Andy doesn't know what happened.
mm.
But at the same time, Lucy seems to be like putting up with Andy's bullshit.
Yeah,
Like, she felt at that time she wasn't necessarily going to maybe do any better, or kind of settling for
yeah,
Andy because he's in proximity and it
mm,
works and whatever else. But it seems like she never really was into the relationship, and then something happened and she firmed up that decision and said, okay, this, yeah, we're done, at least for the time being, until maybe I can put up with your shit again. But yeah.
I guess options are thin on the ground in Twin Peaks today.
Yeah, I also really liked. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about a town that supposedly has 50,000 people in it, but it feels like there's only maybe like 80, and
mm,
at least the way they're presenting it, I really liked
yeah.
that scene where Lucy starts filling in uh, the sheriff about the soap opera she's been watching. Uh,
So earnestly.
yeah, like hey, this is a fantastic drama. I'm glad you're paying attention to this thing that I really love.
Yeah, totally. Oh my god, bless her. Bless them. We'll see what happens. I'm sure there'll be more progress on that. Um, the final thing I've got for the episode is kind of several characters being tied together. So after we see Ben and Audrey's conversation, he gets a phone call and he's like, "Oh, I'll meet you down by the river in half an hour." And I made a note of that because I couldn't remember who was going to meet, or if we were even going to see that. It turns out he's meeting up with Leo. So Ben Horn and Leo have a connection. Not only do we find out that Leo is a murderer, he's killed Bernard, um, Jacques' brother. Um, I mean, and he didn't seem to be affected by like maybe it's not the first time he's killed somebody. Um,
Yeah, clearly.
Ben is, I guess they've had associations before, to some degree. Um, he is essentially employing Leo to do the arson job at the mill. He's obviously going to pay him for it. He seemingly gave him half an envelope with half of the money for the job. And he's like, yeah, he just say, yeah, 3 nights from now, that's when this will be the best time to do it. So we'll see how that goes. He also mentions, Hank said, you were like, it seems like Hank Jennings is the connection between Leo Johnson and Benjamin Horn, even though he's been in prison up until very recently. Um, so several revelations there. We meet Hank as he gets his parole. Got any particular impressions about Hank at first glance?
Um, what I would generally assume about Hank's past is he was put in there for manslaughter,
Yeah,
which
in a car accident,
what
apparently.
he was telling of his story was that it was just kind of fate. That he ran this
Mm,
guy over that was sounding like maybe a homeless guy or something like that, sleeping on the side of the road.
mm,
And there's a couple of things about that that instantly don't feel like the truth, but okay, Hank, let's go with your story there. And then you've got the parole board that says, yeah, that's not why you're here in the first place. He says, yeah, but generally that's, you know, my explanation for what happened. Um,
mm,
so clearly he's disassociating from whatever responsibility is was his that we could maybe trust the court decided was actually his responsibility because it was, and therefore he had to go to prison for manslaughter.
mm,
Um, and at the same time, it feels completely wrong. Like Hank also is putting a facade on, especially when it came to Norma, and he's like, "No, seriously, I've changed, and you gotta believe
He
me, and this and
claims
that,"
to.
and she ain't buying it. But he goes in there and presents to the parole board this concept that yes, he has started to reform himself, and paid his due to society for this manslaughter, and now he just wants to get on with his life. So the parole board grants his parole, even though, and Norma didn't expect that. So she gets the phone call
Mm,
and she's like, you could see she's kind of devastated by this news. She was hoping they would deny it.
mm,
And that also ties into the fact that Norma is telling the parole board that they're going to live together as husband and wife if he's out, and that clearly wasn't her intention at all. She just told them
no.
that to let Hank know that she was, presenting herself as being on his side.
Mm,
I'm not so sure that Hank understands or wants to understand what Norma's position is on their marriage.
right.
So maybe he's got this concept that everything is hunky dory, and if it isn't, okay, well, we're going to make sure that it stays right with maybe a little bit of
Mm,
force involved because this is the man that he used to be,
yeah.
you know, and that's what it would be like if he got out again. Okay, well, either way, Hank seems to be involved with something more than just the fate, as he would like to pass it off of, and in this manslaughter case, because he presented as if he was not really at fault, which leads me to believe he
Yeah.
was entirely at fault, and maybe it was even premeditated. So here's the thing about that. I'm starting to feel that the person that Hank manslaughtered was in fact Josie's husband, Andrew.
Mm.
Maybe I'm wrong on that, but the little creeping smile on your face tells me that I'm
Well,
pretty close.
it's it, I guess it'd be I don't know the official the official record, public record, doesn't tie up with that because obviously the parole board mentioned that it was vehicular manslaughter. Like you said, he ran somebody over, maybe premeditated. But the Andrew Packard died in a boat accident.
Oh, okay.
Also, the
Yeah, I
timing is
forgot that.
slightly off as well. Andrew apparently died just over a year ago. We don't know the details of that accident or what
Yeah,
led up to it.
a year and a half
And,
ago for Andrew Packard.
yeah, a year and a half ago. And then presumably Hank has been in prison for longer than that. I think it said 3 to 5 years. We don't actually know how long he's been,
Yeah,
but I think
that's
it's
the whole
safe to
point.
assume
That
he
could have
has
been a
been.
year and a half, and they're seeking parole
Could be.
for less than 3 years.
I guess technically could be. Well, we'll have to know. We'll wait and
Anyway,
find out. But of course, leading into that though, we find the final revelation of the episode. Seemingly, Hank Jennings and Josie Packard have some kind of
yes,
relationship. As he sends he phone calls her up just to say, "I'll be seeing you soon" or something. By sending a very finely detailed drawing of his domino. He seems to
mm,
have a weird obsession with a double three domino, which he's constantly handling and even sucking on.
yeah.
Kind of slightly weird and creepy, but
Oh, you don't suck on your dominoes?
no, I don't. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, occasionally, when not typically. Um, so yeah, all in all, I mean, I get a very creepy vibe from Hank Jennings, and we know, aside from the fact that he's been in prison, he is at least an associate of Leo Johnson. So that's not that's not really in his favor specifically, but
No. Yeah.
how
So
all of
yeah,
that is going to pan out.
yeah. Maybe he isn't responsible for Andrew's murder. If
Mm,
Andrew was on a boat and this was on the side of the road, okay, so maybe those are two separate things. I didn't remember that Andrew was on a boat, but or in a boat accident. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not connected in some way, because
of
clearly
course.
we've got this connection between Hank and Josie now, where not only do they know each other, but they also appear to have this type of relationship where he is has some kind of hold or dominance over
Yeah,
her,
she
and
seems
she is
scared.
now fearing for her safety and life because he is coming out of prison.
Mm,
So we've actually got now two people that Josie feels have it out for her, and that is
mm,
Catherine and Hank. What is the connection or relationship between Catherine and Hank? What is the
mm,
connection between Ben Horn and Hank? What is the connection between Leo and Hank? And also, what is it seems very clear at this point that Hank is not a good character, and that he
mm.
was at least responsible for some kind of crime other than just um, potentially indeliberate manslaughter.
Yeah.
There's more afoot there that we have not figured out. But one thing is for clear: now Josie is really fearing for her life from two different angles that could be
Mm,
connected, but there also may be something else that we don't know about Josie not being on the up and up. Was she in the
mm.
employ of Hank? at one point, and this is the hold that he has over her, what his Hank got on Josie that he has used
Mm,
against her to cause her to do his bidding. And how is that going to, play into this broader connection, especially with the mill and what
mm,
Catherine and Ben are now trying to do with committing the arson. So
indeed.
I see, now Josie being compromised.
Indeed. And to her credit, um, Catherine made out that Josie is naive and stupid, but she's not as naive and stupid as she seems to be.
Right.
She's obviously aware of Ben and Catherine's relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
followed them to their motel where they're from their little meetup. Presumably entirely coincidence that is the same motel that Philip Gerard was at. Um, Hawk saw her, and presumably she was like trying to take some kind of pictures of them for potential blackmail purposes, or at least some kind of evidence to presumably just kind of protect herself a little bit.
Right.
When Sheriff Truman asks her about that, were you there? She just doesn't answer. She's like, "Oh, I'll speak to you later."
Well, yeah,
So she didn't lie to him, but she
all
wasn't
I gathered
forthcoming
from
either.
that was that Pete was in the room and she didn't want to reveal
Right.
anything that would let it tip Pete off to something that he
Yeah.
wasn't
That's
supposed to
fair
know.
enough.
So I
Yeah.
feel in the next episode she's going to clear that up with Truman
Right.
and
Okay.
have this
Yeah, we'll see.
conversation the following day in which she's going to let him know, yes, I was at the motel because I was tailing Ben and Catherine.
Mm,
The other thing about that scenario that I found kind of interesting was that Catherine did not respond to the gunshot from Andy with anything other than, oh, apparently there's some gunfire outside. That sounds nice. You know,
yeah, they didn't seem too bothered by it, did they?
no.
It's curious. Yeah. Yeah, because you think most people would be like, "Oh, there's literally a gunfight
Yeah,
outside our
at the
door."
very least, heightened senses. Let's look outside and see what the hell is going on. She's just sitting in bed there. Maybe she was smoking too, like,
Yeah, just like,
that sounds exciting. Yeah.
never mind. So, yeah, Ben's like, "Oh, I'm gonna jump in the tub," and she's like, "Oh, okay, never mind." So you go do.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
what I'm going to be looking for specifically in the next episode is how Cooper handles Leo's bloodstained shirt. We
Mm,
obviously have to find out who the blood belongs to. So we might be able to have some evidence on who the blood belongs to, and that then implicates Leo in something happening to whoever that person was. Clearly, if he's murdered Bernie and was disposing of the body, he had no compunction about it and has, probably murdered somebody before, or at the very least,
mm,
in his drug dealer capacity, beat the shit out of somebody and got his blood all over his shirt, which I'm not apt to believe that. I'm apt to believe that it was another murder.
yeah.
So we need to find out who that person was, what happened to them, and now we've got this very solid connection between Leo murdering somebody and their blood being on his shirt that is now in the hands of Cooper.
Mm,
And I'd also like to see what happens to Bobby being the person who was fleeing from the scene and they went after him. Did they catch him?
yeah.
Are they going to make that connection that he was in Jacques' place and all that? And
Indeed.
and then obviously they're going to be, you know, pursuing Jacques and trying to see if they can bring him in for questioning at the very least, or
Indeed.
see what his connection is to all of this.
Excuse me.
So little bit by little bit, Cooper is continuing to crack it open and find the things that he needs to find, and it's taking
Mm,
time. At the same time, I definitely see they're throwing everything they can in the way of misdirection into his path and
mm,
say, okay, well, maybe this means something, but then it turns out to be a false path,
yeah.
or not what it appeared to be at the beginning. Okay, so that it wasn't actually that. Let's go now this route that has opened up,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah, it
very
feels
twisting and winding path for Cooper to the truth.
indeed. One that I feel he's not he's very readily willing to go along, but it feels like he's just collecting up all his clues at the minute. He doesn't know where it's leading or what it's going to reveal to him, but
Right.
he does seem to have a knack for, at least at the moment, differentiating between what he feels is an important clue or something that is of not importance. He just doesn't know what to make of his important clues at the moment.
Right.
Um, we shall see. But yeah, I
Well,
don't think there's anything
well,
I've missed on my end this way.
and likewise, I think that this speaks to David Lynch's ability to present a drawn out murder mystery, in that
Mm,
he also is pushing, like, so we just had some even more new characters in this one,
yeah.
in the form of the one armed man, Gerard, and Bob Lydecker, that we
Mm,
had not even considered prior to the last episode. So he's
yeah,
continuing
indeed.
to present new characters, and I'm seeing this pattern in which he presents somebody that appears suspicious, and then either absolving them through this thing over here that you hadn't considered until it comes up, and then Cooper figures it out. Nope, that's not it. Like he did in the first episode, with all automatically knowing after the interview that Bobby didn't do it. Um, and others that are still remaining in the suspect list because they have not had any evidence come up that disproves their involvement.
Mm,
So I have enjoyed very much this fashion in which David Lynch is presenting characters, and either they are dismissed right away or they are continuing on into the next episode as a continuing suspect.
mm, excellent.
So
I'm glad you're enjoying it. Uh,
yeah,
much more to come.
it's all your fault.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it usually is, to be fair. uh, but yes, thank you, guys. Thank you, Scotty, Faithu, Legion Cage, Veronica, Ryan, and Urchins were here briefly as well. But yeah, thank you so much. That was episode 4 and 5. We will be back next week, same time, with episode 6 and 7, and more revelations and questions will be presented, revealed and presented, I don't doubt.
Yep. Alrighty.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Take care, and I'll speak to you all very soon.
See
Have
you
a good
later.
one.